Unmute.
Hey, we can't hear the song.
Take it. I don't believe that justice is blind. Just look down the halls of the prison tonight. You locked him up when he was just a kid for something I don't think he did. And if he did, it's still a fact. Taking him won't bring them back. So how do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night? And there's questions that need answers. How do you still take a chance? If you can't answer them, then take a swing at mine. How do you sleep at night? Is it justice or revenge? Does it matter in the end? To kill a man you're still not sure. Did what you say you're gonna kill him for. So how do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night? When there's questions that need answers, how do you still take a chance? If you can't answer them, then take a swing at mine. How do you sleep at night? It's not easy what you do, to feel it all rain down on you. All the questions and all the weight. We weren't built to hand out fate. But whatever happens, know there's grace. See the lines across your face. How do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night? There's still questions that need answers. How do you still take a chance, sir? I hope you walk away one day and you feel alright. How do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night? This is a song I wrote.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Abe Bonowitz with Death Penalty Action, and we've got our panel still assembling tonight, but I want to welcome you all. This is the Forecast, the Death Penalty Actions program that we do normally every first Sunday of the month, and sometimes we move it. We might have moved it this time, except that it wasn't convenient to move it. So we here we are on December 1st. And we have good news also. But I want to start, as we always do, just by welcoming everybody and saying that this is a safe space for people who are opposed to the death penalty, and anybody that's on it's creating discord and trouble in the chats here or on the social media will be summarily dismissed. So that's the warning. And also, everybody that is here who is not an official representative of death penalty action is expressing their own opinions. And we welcome everybody's opinions, but we just want to make sure that we're clear that if it's not me or Allie tonight or Sue in her hat as a board member, then it's a person speaking for themselves. And again, we welcome that, and we are grateful for everybody that's here. We are still waiting, I think. Let's see if Michelle is here yet. Don't see her, but we're waiting for Michelle Smith from Missourians Against the Death Penalty to join us and share with us about what's happening in Missouri, where there's an execution scheduled there for Tuesday. I do want to share some good news, though. You already should know because he's been off the hook for a few weeks now. But Thomas Creech was possibly going to be executed, and that's not happening. Oh wait, I think that was last month, right? But Kevin Underwood, who was scheduled to be executed December 19th, that date is now postponed. We don't know the details of that yet, but we did learn that the Oklahoma Board of Pardons and Paroles was to have a clemency hearing this week on the 4th. The 4th was Wednesday, and that's not going to happen, which means that execution is put off, and we can expect that maybe it'll get rescheduled, hopefully not in 2025. But the good news is that we're now down to only 2 scheduled executions. It's unexpected that other states would set dates that would happen in December, although there's a couple of states, well, one actually that I can think of off the top of my head that can set a date and have it carried out within a 2-week period, and that's Georgia. And as far as I know, nobody's expecting that to happen. So it's also possible that we won't see the Indiana execution. There's litigation happening there. But what seems unstoppable, and hopefully I'm mistaken, is the execution in Missouri. So I'm going to send another note to Michelle and see if she's able to join us from Missouri. And while I'm doing that, I want to invite the rest of our panel to introduce themselves briefly, just where you're from, and I also want to invite everybody that's watching in the here on the Zoom. If you're in the Zoom audience, please let us know where you're watching from, and if you're part of any particular organization, feel free to chime in there. So Karen, you want to start? Well, you got on mute.
There we go. I'm sorry. I'm Karen Burkhart, and I'm from Indiana, and I am the Indiana Abolition Death Penalty Coordinator for the state of Indiana for Amnesty International. And I've been working to end the death penalty and hope that we do not have an execution on the 18th of this month, because that would be awful.
Thank you, Karen. Sue?
Hi, my name's Sue Grease, and I am on the Death Penalty Action Board, and I'm calling from Chicago.
Thanks. Allie?
Hi, I'm Allie. I'm Death Penalty Action's Communications Coordinator, and I am now calling from Portland, Oregon. I just moved.
Yay. Bill and Glenda?
Yeah, I'm Bill Breeden, and Glenda's right here.
I'm Glenda.
Yes, it's Glenda right here. You can tell. And we live down there in southern Indiana. We're involved with the abolition movement and
federal death row and state death
row
row in Indiana. So, yeah.
Thank you both for being with us. Reverend Dr. Jeff Hurd.
Let's see.
You got it.
Greetings. No, you were sending me an indication as I was trying to unmute, so it got like it was fighting between your desire to unmute me and my desire to unmute myself. Nevertheless, I'm Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood. I'm a spiritual advisor. I work all over the country, and yeah, I've witnessed 8 executions. Been in the chamber for 8 executions this last 2 years, and hopefully 2025 there'll be no more.
Amen.
Because there are no more executions.
Amen. And Jeff, we're going to send you some money for some fuel oil or something down there. You're always all bundled up.
I'm a very cold-natured person. Thank you.
Charles Keith, I think I saw you here.
Yes. Charles Keith, excuse me, Charles Keith, Impacted Communities Liaison, Death Penalty Action. I got into this fighting for my brother, and now, I fight continuously for him. But I've learned in my heart that I also have to fight for others. So that's what brings me here.
Okay, thank you. And Michelle did send me a note that she is on her way and will be here shortly from Missouri. Oh, let's remove that spotlight there. So Michelle Smith from one of the co-directors of Missourians Against the Death Penalty will be joining us shortly. So why don't we start with Indiana's upcoming execution and hear a little bit about what's possible, what the expectations are. Karen, you organized a rally there in Indiana just a couple of weeks ago. We were able to attend, some of us, myself and Charles and some others. And and do you want to share a little bit about what's happening organizing wise in Indiana? You got to unmute.
So sorry. I am hopeful that the governor will commute the sentence. But in the interim, if that doesn't happen, we're thinking about having some events prior to the execution, like in another couple weeks, we may be at the Capitol again doing another event. We're also planning, we also have some, if things don't work out right and the governor doesn't commute the sentence, then we'll be planning some vigils. Do you want me to talk about that now? Is that the kind of thing you wanted to discuss?
No, just a little bit about the organizing work. And I will note that the Church of the Brethren in Fort Wayne, Nan wrote earlier this morning to say that they were doing a vigil at the courthouse there. That's the county where the murder took place, and they did one. Nan, maybe you can put it in the chat if they did one today. They did one last week, and so I know that stuff is happening. But there was a great turnout at the rally a couple of weeks ago. Even the Archbishop of Indianapolis participated. So just if you want to just you haven't had an execution there in 15 years, Karen.
It's just, incredible, and that they're thinking about doing it again. And in addition to that, I mean, we have the federal death row in Indiana, which if the president doesn't do something soon, we'll have a incredible number of executions here, like we did the last time Trump was president. So it's a sad time, that's for sure, to even think about that. But I really am hopeful because we've had some different people come out and talk about trying to convince the governor not to go ahead with this execution, and so I'm very hopeful about that. How about you, Bill and Glenda?
Well, I'm hopeful too. My feeling is that how absurd it is to 7 days before you celebrate the birth of the Prince of Peace, you're going to kill somebody in Indiana. And I think the governor is part of a church. And so we're encouraging people to write to governor and ask him to act on his faith, if nothing else, that how absurd it is to celebrate Christmas by killing somebody.
And when and when I think about all the good things he's done over the past 8 years, to end his career with execution seems incredibly, I can't think of the word, Bill. I know you could think of one.
Well, sure. I'm not altogether aware of all the good things he's done over the last 8 years. Rakita and others have certainly made our state much more backwards. But I think that I hope Governor Holcomb will see the absurdity of what he's doing, and will change that. I think that there's a possibility of that. We're certainly encouraging the letter writing. If the 18th comes and they don't stop it, then I'll be up at Michigan City for sure. I've been there for most of the executions.
It's been such
a long time.
It's been a long time.
It's absurd. That's one of the absurdities of it. We've had 15 years without state killing, and I don't think the crime rates changed that much in Indiana.
So it was really encouraging to me at the rally, the different people that spoke, and seemed like that they were really encouraging either church members or friends or whomever to write to the governor. And so, what else can we do? Right? Call. I had a call from a woman in Illinois. Someone put me in touch with her. She used to work with Holcomb. And so I thought it was going to be a conversation that would help me know what to say to Holcomb if I called him, that might make a difference. And she just basically told me, no, don't even think that he's going to change this, that this man, needs to die, was what she was saying. And so it was a really awkward, I called her thinking she was someone who was opposed to it, but it was a strange conversation.
Quite bizarre.
So that was not encouraging, that she worked for him and she had that attitude. But I was encouraged by the rally and all the people that were there and the different church voices that were there, and they have a way of getting in touch with more people and calling them out to write, and so that was encouraging.
It's called For Whom the Bells.
I didn't mean to start that.
No, that's great. I was going to say, I remember meeting a lady that had seen the information about the rally on the news, and she said she couldn't help but come because she felt so called to do something about the death penalty. And it was just so heartening to find some people that, had just heard about it that morning and came. It was incredible.
Yeah. It was a great presence and got huge coverage, saturation coverage, as it often does when you get a first execution in a long time. So I counted at least 6 cameras there, and we got some really positive coverage. And actually, I'll share a little bit more about that video in a moment. But I wanted to ask if either of you can speak to the issues around this particular case.
Well, Corcoran is certified schizophrenic. I mean, he's very mentally ill. He wants to be killed, actually. I mean, I think it's kind of strange for the governor just to allow that just because somebody wants to die. When they won't allow, people have the right to die in other situations. But I think that, Corcoran is obviously a very sick man, a very mentally ill, and how absurd it is to kill him. It's not going to save anybody. It's not going to change any crime scenes or crime statistics. It's simply murder. And I think also, while I've got the floor, I'll just say that we've got 27 men on federal death row whose appeals are exhausted, 27 out of 36. We have no more appeals left. And we may see a murder spree in Terre Haute this coming year unless Biden commutes the sentences, which we're trying to get him to do. And I think this is an imperative. I've been in a death row once in death chamber with Corey Johnson. And my man that I see on death row for the last 18 years, his appeals are up, and he's very likely going to be in the first wave if that happens. So we're encouraging everybody to write Biden He's Roman Catholic. The Catholic doctrine has been changed by the Pope to oppose the capital punishment. And I think we really just need tons of letters to Biden to stop this, and write to Holcomb at the same time and ask him to follow up, at least pay attention to the Jesus I suspect that he worships. To kill within a week of Jesus' birthdays, I mean, it seems to me like Jesus wouldn't get off on that kind of thing.
So, Abe, you asked if knew anything about this case in particular. I had forgotten that Corcoran was he had killed before. I think he killed his parents. I think he killed his parents, and then because there was such an outcry from his neighbors that who said he's mentally ill, please don't. I can't remember now the exact thing. I know he was in prison. He was in prison, and then he was let out of prison. And then when he was let out of prison, then he killed the 4 people. So there's this, that the woman that I talked to in Illinois, that was what she was throwing at me. Said they're not going to stop it this time. Last time, because there was such an outcry because of his mental illness, they stopped it, and then look what he did. And I said, but he can't hurt anybody where he is now. It's not like he's not any danger to anyone where he is now, even though I don't think that's a good place for him to be, obviously. But anyway, so I know there were other things before this particular thing that he was put on death row for.
Okay, well, thank you both or all 3 of you actually, for giving us this. I want to share a little bit more in a few minutes of what we're doing about this. Nan corrected me in the chat that the rally in Fort Wayne was yesterday, and so people are waking up and showing up in Indiana, not having had to do this for 15 years, and hopefully we won't have to do it. Hopefully I know there's still litigation pending, and we'll see what happens. But what we know is that if this execution does go forward in Indiana, it'll be the 3rd state after Utah and South Carolina to resume executions after more than a decade this year. And Idaho was trying, they failed, and we know there's some other states, Arizona, although they haven't been quite that long, and some other states we may see them again soon. So while y'all were chatting, I was sharing the petitions the Death Penalty Action has. There's also the Indiana Abolition Coalition. I put a link to that in the chat. And we're encouraging people to support that organization and sign their petition as well. And then, of course, thanks, Bill, for raising up the federal stuff. We're going to talk more about that as soon as we finish up with talking about the Missouri execution, which is in just a couple of days now. So stick around because there's more conversation to be having. But I want to welcome now Michelle Smith, who, excuse me, is the co-director of Missourians Against the Death Penalty. And Michelle, thanks for making time on this holiday weekend to be with us tonight and to share a bit about what's happening there in Missouri.
Good evening, Abe. Thank you for inviting me this evening. Of course, we always have together in such horrible situations and circumstances. But of course, I appreciate you and DA for always providing the space for states like Missouri and others who are killing people, so frequently to where it is almost as if we're just losing track of the numbers of people and the lives, and so it's just really devastating. So thank you. And I say we were losing track because I was talking
Michelle,
to someone.
Yes. We lost your video for a second, so I wanted to make sure we had caught that back. So now you're back.
Okay, I'm sorry, and I'm in deep south in the rural area, so it may be a little bit difficult. My apologies. But I was talking about things getting lost because just under 2 months ago, in a week, I believe 5 states have executed people, including Missouri, back in the September. So, 2024 has been a horrible year, and it's culminating in Missouri on Tuesday, December 3rd. And it is the execution of Christopher Collins. Thank you so much, Allie, for putting in the link to the petition. But yes, Mr. Collins is scheduled to be executed this upcoming Tuesday. And interestingly enough, Tuesday is Giving Tuesday, and Giving Tuesday is the day to where organizations fundraise and raise money, which is very necessary. But this is the second Tuesday. The other was in 2022, where Giving Tuesday was a Tuesday that Missouri killed somebody. And so I actually coined these days Killing Tuesday, because in our state, that's what it is, it's Killing Tuesday. And so this Tuesday again is going to be Killing Tuesday in our state of Missouri. And it's just it's so devastating to understand that 4 people have been executed this year, but a 4th person scheduled to be executed this year. One of those people were innocent. Mr. Collins has several health issues, including heart failure. Also, someone else earlier this year was executed, Mr. Hosier, David Hosier, also had heart failure. So it's just horrific that our state decides that people who have severe health issues or severe mental illnesses or who are innocent deserve to be executed. It's just a sad time we're living in overall. And in Missouri, we just had, again, a horrible year, as the country has. But, we are hopeful. You talked a little bit ago about President Biden being Catholic. Our incoming governor in Missouri is also Catholic. And so we are hopeful that, with our religious community and our faith community, that we'll be able to get some concession out of our governor for next year to at least put a moratorium in place. So that's something that we are going to be advocating for, as well as nationally. We're advocating for President Biden to commute a federal death row. So the work is ongoing, even though we've had a devastating year that will again culminate Tuesday with the execution of Mr. Christopher Collins, who, like so many other people on our death rows, have dealt with their own traumas since childhood, dealt with lots of issues, including mental health and health issues. So we are going to hold space for Mr. Collins Tuesday. As always, we will be outside the prison, which is at Von Terre, Missouri, the Eastern Reception and Diagnostic Center in Von Terre, Missouri. We gather around 5 p.m. The execution is scheduled for 6 p.m. And so, again, we're going to hold space. We're going to have a lot of people out praying, for Mr. Collins, for his family, and also for the victim in the victim's family. We hold everybody that's touched by death penalty and this system, this horrible system of capital punishment. We really hold everybody, in our thoughts and prayers during these tough times.
Thank you, Michelle. And we're hoping it's possible that some of us will be there from Ohio in support of your activities. And as well, I wanted to mention that also on Tuesday the 3rd, we'll be delivering, or you all, at least your co-director and others at the state capitol will be delivering the petitions that people are signing, both the MADP petition, the link is in the chat, as well as the action petition, and hopefully also the Catholic Mobilizing Network petition, whatever else is all gathered together. And as we always do, collaboratively presenting those petitions. So,
thank you.
See if there's any questions. Are there any questions in the chat?
And again, thank you very much for the petition, and again, all of your work. And I appreciate DPA and of course Catholic Mobilizing putting up petitions with us in support of this work. So thank you so much.
Of course, Michelle. And we're all grateful for your leadership, and we hope that in 2025 there's no executions in Missouri, and you can count on us to be supportive whatever is happening. So I'm just looking to see if there's any questions. Nothing in the Q&A, although somebody asked about Mr. Menzies in, I think, Utah, and no word on him yet. But anyway, Michelle, thank you. I'm going to just share my screen again real quick and show people that this is, again, at deathpenaltyaction.org. Here's the petition for Christopher Collings on our site. And of course, as we always do, it links straight over to Missourians to abolish the death penalty. It's against the death penalty, right? And their petition, and that's where you can get deeper information as well. So that's where you can go to find the information. And thank you, Michelle. If you want to hang out and be part of the conversation on the federal stuff, we're going to get into that in just a moment. But just looking to see one last time if there is any questions in the chat. Michelle, just people sending their support for you and also for the folks in Indiana and all. So thank you for making time for us tonight. And then I want to just go back to this because it's going to be pertinent to what we're doing if we make it over there. If my team makes it over there to Missouri on Tuesday, we're going to bring this bell. And this is Sister Barbara Batista from Terre Haute talking about this bell here.
Toll, and it's a nationwide program that many faith communities will publish every month. Those persons scheduled for execution across the nation, federal or state, for whom the bells toll. That way your congregation, your co-workers know the date and the name of the next person scheduled to be executed. And then you ring your church bell on that day. We toll it, 30, but we toll our bell. So please consider, look it up, for whom the bells toll.
Thank you, sister. Thank you, Charles. Thank you to everyone for coming out. Again.
And just a word about that bell, a little bit more. The state of Delaware just abolished its death penalty. The Supreme Court threw it out there in 2016. And just this year, on June 30th, the Delaware legislature scrubbed the Delaware statute of all its death penalty language. And at that time, Delaware citizens opposed to the death penalty saw that they had this bell, which has been tolled outside the prison at many of the 16 executions that took place there. And their choice was put that bell in a museum or send it on the road. And they decided to send it on the road. They called us up at Death Penalty Action, said, come get this bell. And that's what we did. And Charles and I went out there and got it. And they had a little send-off event with us in September. And then we were able to get a friend of Charles's, who's a very adept at building things, and he took it off the trailer that it was on. It was on its own trailer, and put it into that little cart that we created. And now we can take it wherever we need to go. And its maiden voyage was that was the first time it was told at an event outside of Delaware ever, at Indianapolis a couple of weeks ago. And then we took it on down to Alabama, where it was at the rally outside of the Capitol in Alabama, and then outside the prison. And those of you that were on the vigil would have heard that bell tolled at that time. So, we have had fits and starts in terms of the For Whom the Bells Toll campaign, but that is an ongoing thing, and it's an organizing opportunity for people to invite communities of faith who have bells and anybody else to actually toll their bells. And we saw this happen in Utah when Utah resumed executions, and also earlier this year in Idaho. And the amazing thing was in Idaho, we couldn't hear where we were outside the prison, they started that execution and failed to carry it through, but we all thought it was happening. But the folks that were at the state capitol in Idaho, in Boise, could hear the bells tolling from different corners of the city and different parts of downtown. And same thing in Utah, the Bishop Solis, even sent out a letter saying everybody should be tolling their bells at the time of the execution. So it's a way to engage folks. It's an organizing tool. We'll be talking more about that. Charles, you want to add anything about the experience of that bell?
I didn't know such a thing existed. So when I saw it, I was in awe, and to know that they were already, ringing that bell for an execution. I was like, wow. So when they gave it to us, I was kind of hoping that we wouldn't have to ring this bell for executions. Maybe we would get the chance to ring it because a person's life was spared. Well, I see that that's probably not what's going to happen, but that was my take. I said, this can actually be a victory bell throughout the whole abolitionist movement. When these bells ring, that means a life's been saved. But we're still going to continue to toll them, knowing what type of bell that was and its history. To me, it boosted me as an abolitionist, because every time you get a hold of any type of props or something that's in the movement, and we have that bell and we're bringing that spirit out of Delaware, taking it with us because they don't need it anymore. And we're trying to take it into these other states and let them know that they don't need us or this bell anymore either. So, we're ringing in protest, but we're ringing.
Thanks. Let me just share a little bit more about that. I put the link to this in the chat. This is the For Whom the Bells Toll webpage, and there's a little video about that right here.
Right now, several states across the country are in a mad rush to execute people on death row. With so many lives at stake, communities of faith are standing up in opposition to this continuation of the cycle of violence. There are 3 simple ways communities of faith can help. First, add a special time of prayer during your services prior to a scheduled execution. We ask that you pray for the victim's family, the offender and their family, legal teams, court officials, executioners, and others impacted. Second, toll a bell for 2 minutes on the day of an execution. If you don't have a bell, display a banner or sign showing your opposition to the death penalty. Third, go to our website, forwhomthebellstoll.org, to learn more about our movement. Order an action kit unique to your state and register your participation. We must act now because time is running out for so many men and women on death row. Together, we can abolish the death penalty.
Thank you. And with that, Allie?
Yeah, I just wanted to check in because a couple of questions popped up while you were talking. Abu was asking about what happened to the old bell, and then Sandra wanted to hear about if we are aware of other states that want to reintroduce the death penalty.
Okay, well, first, so the bell that you saw actually in that video I just played was made. I made that, but I had a machine shop make that. We took a retired gas canister and had it cut, and then put on a post and on a stand. And when I was the director of Floridians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, so. That bell we left with Reverend Lynn Hopkins, who is with Project Hope to Abolish the Death Penalty, and is a regular leader in Alabama. So now, when we can make it to Alabama, they've got a bell. The sister of that bell, the bottom half of the gas canister, has been used in Florida all this time. Ever since I left Florida in 2005, I left the other part of that bell there. And if you've been on the Florida vigils, then you've seen that part there. And then there's other states that have bells. I know, and actually in Idaho, there was a church that didn't have bells, but they have a handbell choir. So they actually got some of their handbell choir members together and tolled the bell with their handbells. at the time of the execution. It was really powerful. We've got a little video of that somewhere. I'm going to have to dig it out. As to states trying to reintroduce the death penalty, there's always attempts. Iowa had an attempt that was very short-lived. There's always bluster and there's always attempts, but there's no serious reintroduction attempts that we're aware of at this time. And that can change. So, what we do know is that still alive, and this Wednesday morning in Ohio, there's an interested party, not interested party, it's by invitation only testimony in the Ohio Senate Judiciary Committee. That'll be broadcast, and actually Ohioans to Stop Executions is going to have like a little chat room where you can watch the broadcast and participate in a chat as it's happening. So if you can find hopefully information about that at Ohioans to Stop OTSE.org, Ohioans to Stop Executions, and we'll send out a link to that too. And Charles and I plan to be at at that hearing, and that's a bill to abolish the death penalty in Ohio, which is like a number of states, totally Republican dominated, and yet we have bipartisan legislation. We'll see where it goes because the Republicans are all fighting amongst themselves here in Ohio, and it's really been one of the most unproductive legislative general assemblies in Ohio's history these past 2 years because of how the Republicans who are in charge and could do anything they want are fighting amongst themselves. And everybody else is sitting by eating popcorn and being disappointed. So that's the situation in Ohio. And we're going to see what happens in the coming, in 2025 in terms of legislation to restrict or repeal the death penalty. We could probably expect another reasonable expectation of maybe progress in Kansas if we fail in Ohio during this lame duck session, and we could see some repeal legislation coming back in Ohio. And I'm trying to think of which other states actually have some serious opportunities. I think we're going to be very much in a defensive posture these next 2 years. Certainly nothing's happening in Congress that's going to be helpful to us on our issue that we know of at this time. But maybe some leaders will grow a spine and be able to push something through that could be helpful. We'll find out. Other questions?
Abu is asking about what happened to Citizens United for Alternatives to the Death Penalty.
Oh, thanks, Abu. So that's a group that I started with a bunch of folks in 1996, and it did very much what Death Penalty Action does. However, in 2005, I was basically the person running that, and I was hired by New Jerseyans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, so we sort of put it on pause. I became the field manager for New Jerseyans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, and then when we abolished the death penalty in New Jersey in 2007, I was hired by the then existing National Coalition to abolish the death penalty, and at that time we just shut it down, and it did not exist. And it was pretty much over. The National Coalition bought out all of our stock of T-shirts and all that stuff. And I worked there for 5.5 years, and then that job ended. And we started up Death Penalty Action a few years later in 2017. And this is a perfect segue when we saw Donald Trump being inaugurated and realized there was going to be federal executions. And we looked around the movement and we didn't see anybody that would be in leadership for providing everyday people like all of us action tools to do something about the death penalty at the federal level and to be in protest outside the prison at the time of executions and to support the folks in Terre Haute. So we worked with the folks in Terre Haute to create the Terre Haute Death Penalty Resistance Network and made sure and lifted up protest outside the prison at the federal government. And that's hopefully what we can all avoid if President Biden does the right thing and commutes all those sentences. So let's talk about the federal death penalty for a few minutes here. I see a question here from Jeff about are bells exclusionary of people of other faiths? And I would say that they are not. I would say that if you have bells, and that's what we say in the video and on the webpage, if you have bells, use them. And if you don't, find some other way to indicate your opposition to the death penalty. However, there's a number of people, our friend, the late Bill Pelkey, often said this, and Shane Claiborne says this all the time. If it weren't for Christians, there wouldn't be a death penalty. And therefore, we want to make sure that we're giving folks that have bells and Christian churches ways to be engaged. So, we do the best we can with what we've got, and that's one of those things. As to the federal death penalty and what's happening, I shared earlier the organizational sign-on letter. Please, if you're not an organization or representing an organization, sign a petition. Write your own letters, but don't go and put your name on that letter when you don't have an organization that we can identify and verify to add to the letter, which we now have 400 organizations signed on. We also now have verified that letter has been delivered into the White House at the highest levels several times now, and we're going to re-deliver it again next week. On December 9th or 10th, we're still figuring that out. So December 10th is International Human Rights Day, so it's an opportunity for everybody. If you're a part of a church or a synagogue or a mosque, or you have got a darts club or whatever it is, some kind of organization that can add its name to this list, then we invite you to do so because it's those numbers growing that just helps us build a little bit of attention to it. The most important thing about that letter is the lead signer, of course, our board chair, Reverend Sharon Risher, whose mother and two cousins were murdered, among the 9 people murdered at Mother Emanuel AME Church in South Carolina in 2015. And that killer is on federal death row. And what Reverend Risher says is that she does not want to see Dylann Roof executed. And if the president is going to commute Dylann Roof's sentence, he's got to commute them all. That's her line, and we're doing our best to find a way for her to be able to visit with President Biden directly. But we know that her letter, our letter, is in the White House, and we're going to put it there again. And if you look at Allie, if you can put the link she's put that up there, the link to the letter. You can also see all the organizations that have been doing this. And if you look at the federal commutation toolkit, which is on the webpage also, and we send that out to folks that are engaged in this letter writing thing. And you've also seen it repeatedly in death penalty action emails. If you get to the toolkit, let me just share that with you. Then you can see where all of the, let's see, here we are. Yes, this is it. Sally will put the link to that in the chat, but this is what it looks like. And this is the federal commutation toolkit. And within this, there's action items, things for people to do, organizations, individuals. We need everybody calling. You're going to see a lot of big push on this week from us. Also it's not too late to send postal mail. We're asking people to do that. If you live outside the country, write to the U.S. ambassador to your country and also to your State Department or whatever it is that deals with the U.S. government, write to your representatives there. If you're part of an organization, invite all of your members to sign the petitions, and not just our petition, but the Death Penalty Action, the Catholic Mobilizing, the ACLU, the Commute the Row. I think there's at least one other petition that's out there. Amnesty, I think, has one. I should put that in there. There's sample media posts to share. But if you get all the way down to the bottom, we're going to talk about these postcards here in a moment. Here's just some of the news coverage. We've really put the news coverage in that mentions our campaign, but there's some others as well. But this is just a sampling of the media coverage that we've gathered just in the last couple of weeks to cover this issue and in our campaign. So these are some of the things to do. And actually, now I want to introduce actually the instigator for these postcards that you can see that we've got available to you if you want to order them. And we now have enough availability to send them, even if you can't afford to pay for them. But let me just stop my screen share here and invite Sue Grease, who's longtime supporter of our work, going back in my work and lots of other people's anti-death penalty work for decades. But she made the mistake of telling me she'd retired from her job as a CFO, as a chief financial officer. And I said, oh, really? We need a treasurer. And now she's on our board and she's our treasurer. So Sue Grease, welcome. And tell us about the postcards and what you're doing with them.
Thanks, Abe. But I just want to mention real quickly, my comrades in Indiana were trying to get a contingent together to be on site and protest and witness if something does go through. But I hope that doesn't happen, and I hope I don't have to ever meet you in person, and I mean that in the nicest way. The postcards. I wear I abolished the death penalty masks. I still wear them on CTA. I wear buttons. I got T-shirts, like a lot of us. And a lot of people here in Chicago, people will say to me, I like your button or I like your shirt. So I thought, oh, instead of writing stuff down, I'd like to have something to hand to people, especially now, because Illinois abolished the death penalty in 2011, as a lot of you know. And it's, sometimes hard to get people involved in things going on in other states. I mean, we all are, but, sometimes you want to grab people with something they can do. So Allie beautifully realized these, the concept for these cards. Thank you, Allie. There's a couple different things. Two are what we call palm cards. If you've ever done election work and you hand stuff out, just the right size of a postcard, but they're not a postcard. They just have all the information you need, the little bit.lys, the sign-on letter, any action step you want to take, including featuring calling the White House, is on these cards. Okay, so there's a couple different things you can do with these before we get to the postcards. I've taped them together and I'm putting them in coffee shops. If you have any ideas, put them in the thing too. Putting them in coffee shops for people to take a picture or whatever and do stuff on my lefty coffee shops where we all have meetings. And then I'll jump to the postcards. I'm sorry, I'm talking really fast. The other thing is a postcard. It's got the message on it. It has very nice language about his legacy of nonviolence, which will be possible if he commutes these death sentences in death row. I've got a bunch of stamps left over. I over-ordered for some of my political work. So I've been stamping them before putting them in the hands of people I know who are going to send them, okay? And I always have some with me to give to people. You want to send it? I've been sending piles to other friends so they can give to their circles. That's an idea, because we all have outer circles that we can, friends and family, organizations we all work with, congregations. You mentioned, I think, Bill, about talking in front of congregations. If you are part of a faith community, bring some of these cards, ask if you can have a chance to talk during one of the services and give people want to do stuff. That's what I love about DPA. They give people opportunities to do stuff. Here's something immediate steps people can take. That's what I love about these. See if you can talk or just stand in the back and hand them to people. There's a million things you can do. I'm not religious, I'm a humanist, but I still have one of these signs for all my Zooms, for my other stuff, and in my window. You can get one of those, order one of those, stand there with these signs. I'm going to do it at our Federal Plaza. I'm getting up the nerve to stand there and hand things. Why not? We've got to stop this. I also want to say about congregations, I'm not religious, but social justice oriented congregations, and there's a lot in Chicago, they let you get in front of them. I've done it before, and talk about things like this and give people opportunities and shed some light on these social justice issues that people can get involved in. So don't be shy about doing that if you're not religious, or if you want to talk in front of a faith community who is not your own faith community. People let you do that type of stuff. Let's see. I said coffee shops. If you're part of Indivisible, I'm trying to get this added, Indivisible or anything like that. trying to get this added to the steps you can take today. Every day I get 2 different steps of things I can do, things people can do if you're part of Indivisible. I think that's happening all across the country. See if your local or state Indivisible would mention this federal action here. And if I'm going to bring some of these to my local Indivisible meeting, if you don't know what Indivisible is, that's okay. You can look it up. They were created too during the first Trump reign to resist and fight back. So anyway, if anyone has any questions about these cards, I think someone already mentioned there is an order form if you can afford, if your group or you as an individual can swing it to actually pay and order it. But there's also, like, I guess, scholarships or sponsorships available. If you can't, we still want to get these in your hands so you can get them in the hands of everyone in your circle and everyone outside your circle, as many people as possible. We got about a month and a couple weeks to make him, ask him, urge him to do the right thing. And this is the kind of public pressure that is so important. And I'm done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for inspiring this. We still have probably 3,000 or 4,000 of those cards left. We printed up 10,000. We got a number of orders from around the country, and we now have it so they're sent out. If not the day that we received the order, then the next day by regular postal mail. So you get them in a couple of days, ideally. And we haven't heard anybody complaining that they're not getting them. So that's a tool for people, and just thank you for inspiring it, Sue. Looking at the chat here, George Hale, I'm going to send you a panelist link if you want to join and ask your question live. But I did want to note that George Hale is a member of the media from Indiana, and he also covers the federal death row. He and I like to joke that one of us gave the other person COVID at the end of the federal execution spree last time. But here he comes. George, welcome. And we want to take the conversation back to Indiana for a minute. You want to frame your question for us, and let's see if we can have some dialogue. I'm sure several of us will have some thoughts. Welcome.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So like I mentioned, I'm still sort of just brainstorming how to approach this, but on December 18th, there's going to be an execution in Indiana for the first time in 15 years. I'm sure you guys just discussed that, but I was away, unfortunately. But so one of the things that's really curious about Indiana is that their statute doesn't seem to guarantee a place for media witnesses. And so, at this point in the federal executions, we would already have a place locked down, for whoever is being executed, like which media witnesses would, who from our station would be there. So you have to go through a background check and all kinds of stuff. Whereas for Indiana, they haven't, offered any kind of place or position or even process through which to apply. And so from what I understand from talking to other journalists who were working, and other activists too, who were, around back then, they kind of just come out and tell you what happened. And so I'm just really curious if, anyone on the chat has ever encountered a situation like this and how, either journalists have pushed back or activists have pushed back or, God forbid, the attorneys of people being executed. Just throw it out there. I don't really have a specific question. I'm just thinking out
loud. George, you're right. I've been to executions at Michigan City several years ago, and there is no access to them, or there weren't at that time. And I guess there's not still. We haven't had one for a while, so I haven't thought about it. But they just come out. Basically, they just come out and say, give you the time of death, and then turn around and walk away.
Yeah, so one of the things I've done is reached out just today to the public access counselor here, who's always been great about kind of clarifying what the law is, at least. My question for him is basically, does the Attorney General or the Department of Corrections or the warden, or any of the above, do they have the ability to say, okay, sure, the law doesn't guarantee the media have a place here, but we're gonna let one in at least, because we obviously don't want there to be any confusion of whether or not this goes according to plan, and whatever. So that's one of the things I'm like trying to follow up with, is basically whether or not we can just ask the state to just let one of us go and then tell the other reporters what happened. Otherwise, it just seems absurd to me that we're going to have no one there who's like on the side of the public, just on the side of either the defendant or the prosecution or whatever, the prison. So yeah, anyway, that's trying to figure out a way to get around that if I can, but I don't know.
Well, we do have several times when we've had botched executions in the past, and it's possible that they just really don't want anybody there to see them do it again.
Oh yeah, I mean that's primary concern from our perspective as like journalists, or at least, well, I say ours. My station, I work for the NPR and PBS station in Bloomington that covers federal death row, and so we were involved in covering the federal executions and witnessed all kinds of I don't know if botch is the right word, but the execution not seeming to go according to plan, I guess, is how I would phrase it. But whereas if you just listen to what the guards and the people from the prison said happened, everything was fine. Guy just fell asleep, and it was all peaceful. And the only reason you even knew that that there were some signs of a botched execution was because we had a room full of journalists sitting there, right, literally writing and taking notes. And so I'm just kind of concerned that Indiana is about to start executing people, for the first time in 15 years using the exact same method the feds used, a couple of years ago. And but we're not going to know really what happened, other than, obviously the lawyers and loved ones of the person being executed will be there too. So it's not like it's just the state side, but it's still, not the same thing as having someone there who's not on one side or the other,
Who's there? Is there like a designated public witness?
No, that's the thing. That's what. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and I should have been clear. There are some statutes that don't say it has to be a journalist, but just says like a respected individual or some. Yeah, but as far as I know, Indiana doesn't have anything like that. So it's just, the prisoner's family and the state's side.
Kind of goes with the idea that murderers don't like witnesses. You know what I mean? If we're going to kill somebody, they'd really rather not have people watch them do it.
Yeah. Abe, I'm going to jump in real quick.
Yeah, sure. Jeff posted the link. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just put George, you might have seen this. I just put up a link from Mississippi College's Law Review. It's about 9 years old, but it talks about statutes and the right to witness and those types of things. But what I wanted to quickly speak to is the as Bill, I know that you've witnessed an execution before, or been in the chamber for an execution. I mean, that's a right that really was won, by litigation. Us clergy all over the country who, not just asked for that spot, but demanded it. Because what had happened for years was the state said, okay, we will allow a clergy to be in place, but it's going to be our clergy.
Yeah.
And not the person who's being executed, their chosen clergy. And so I mean, I could go on, but we're 3 or 4 years into the Supreme Court having said that the person being executed, the condemned, gets to choose their clergy. I bring that up simply to say that I think if there's a right I mean, there has to be a right that exists for the press to witness executions, but the problem is I don't think that's been litigated. I don't think it's been litigated all the way up to the Supreme Court. So, George, what I'm encouraging you to do, my friend, is hire a wonderful constitutional lawyer and take this thing all the way up to the Supreme Court, because it could create a really, amazing precedence that, I mean, and I don't know. I mean, the difficulty I think that you run into is exactly what you just said. These statutes say there has to be a witness. But the question is, who is the witness? I mean, the state is able to say, well, we've got the executioner there, and they're employed by the state, they're employed by us, so therefore that's the state's witness, or that's the person that comes out. I mean, obviously that's not fair, and it's not going to give an accurate depiction of what's actually happening. But George, I really do think that this is a question that is ripe for litigation. I think it's a question of freedom of the press. It's a question of the First Amendment. But and I think that the way it can be argued is not from the reporter's perspective, but from the condemned's perspective, because that's what happened with clergy. It became something that the condemned were arguing for, their clergy. Does the condemned get a right to, for their reporter or for their media witness to be able to go out and tell their story, as opposed to the story being chosen for them based on who the state allows in the room?
Yeah,
It's a question, George. I think what I'm trying to say is it's a question of where you see it coming from. If it's coming from the rights of the condemned, then it's easier to get some sort of temporary restraining order or something like that. But if it's coming from the right of the reporter, it's a little bit easier to say, we'll figure it out. Just not this time.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. And so I am in touch now with the Indiana Society of Professional Journalists. We've been discussing how to respond to this, and there's a couple of things in motion. Nothing that I would get too excited about, but definitely like trying to find out what our options are at least. And so that include legal action. That's obviously not something I'm personally opposed to. I mean, anyway, I didn't mean to like throw this out there and make this all y'all's responsibility. Obviously, we have different agendas here. Like we're arguing for transparency of the process. You guys are trying to stop the execution. Totally two different jobs here. But I would think there's certainly a mutual benefit to knowing what's going on. So
we absolutely support freedom of the press and for there to be independent witnesses that are going to report the truth. And that's what we're seeing, in Alabama. I mean, we had to start a pull back the curtains campaign to get the idea that witnesses, media should see the whole, and we still have not won this yet, but we believe that the public witnesses should watch the execution process from the time that the prisoner is wheeled in his wheelchair or walks into the death chamber until they are dead. That ought to be viewed, the whole thing, by independent witnesses and by people in several different media outlets, not just one. Because we all know that one can tell a story that is not the same that would be told by someone else.
For sure. Yeah, no, thanks. I mean, I appreciate that, Abe. Yeah, I definitely think that, our interests obviously align there. And like, I certainly share the same, like, I would have, if I were king, then I would demand all those things that you just mentioned. But I mean, I even think too, like, I don't even, like, obviously I'm a journalist and I think that journalists should be there, but like, I don't know if we're necessarily entitled to be there, but surely I would like there to be a witness there who is not working for either side that I can go up to and ask what happened, and like not have to wonder, like,
I think it's
you're getting paid
George,
by either side. So it's just, like
anyway. I said again, I think you have to frame it in the sense of the condemned has a right for you to be there. Because I think if you frame it, the public has a right for you to be there. I think that in terms of the litigation, if the right is centered in the condemned, then again, I think you're going to get a lot more traction in terms of litigation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate the suggestion. So yeah, I'll be I got what 2-3 weeks.
I also was going to say quickly, and I was thinking about Bill again, who is at the top left of my screen. Bill, I don't know you that well. We've been on here a couple of times, but I've always felt like, a kinship with him and with other ministers and whatnot who do this, because there are two hats. I mean, we are, ardently opposed to the death penalty, but at the same time, there is that ministry that takes place in the execution chamber that is something that's different. And I guess I just want you to hear that I'm speaking from that ministry space. Not necessarily, I mean, obviously I still want to end the death penalty, but I guess I'm just trying to say, I think that, we all wear two hats is what I'm trying to say.
I was muted there. I noticed it. Yeah, I think that's true. And I, as I said when I spoke at Indianapolis, I think Governor Holcomb, the very least he could do is go to the death chamber. If you're going to allow this to happen, go in there, have the courage to walk in there and watch it done. Because I think it would only take one of those for him to change his mind, in my opinion. It's
I think that's true. I think juries, judges, those who are saying we want this to be carried out, they should have to witness it.
absolutely, absolutely.
I will note to his credit, um, not trying to give credit to anybody, but Gentner Drummond in Oklahoma, the attorney general, has gone and sat in the witness room and watched these executions. And as far as I know, he's the only attorney general that's been doing that as out of habit. I don't know, Jeff, do you know of any others where that's happening?
I will say that I know it's awkward for him because it's very awkward for me, but every time I've been in there for about the first 2 or 3 minutes that I'm in there, I stare like right at him and, make him squirm because I want him to know that like I see him. I know he's there. And, and I often will mention afterwards that he was there. Talk to Abe about it, talked on, Zoom about it. But yeah, it's a weird thing to congratulate somebody on, but again, at least he has a little bit of guts to sit there and watch.
Even if he's not, I'm just remembering.
Maybe it's sadism. I don't know.
I'm remembering Anthony Sanchez's, was it his aunt or his mother, whatever it was, he turned to them and said, "I'm sorry for your loss," right after killing Anthony. It's just
his aunt. Yeah, his aunt.
Yeah. So
she didn't know, and that was the funny thing is she didn't know who he was. She thought he was just some nice person consoling her.
Let me just point out the absurdity of fascism and the bureaucracy of fascism. There was a woman came from Texas to see her son executed in Trump's killing spree and murder spree. And she was there to watch it. 4 to 5 weeks after that execution, she got a letter from the federal penitentiary saying, "This is to inform you that your son was executed on such and such a date." They got weeks after she had watched it done, she gets a letter to inform her that her son was killed. That shows you how absolutely inhuman and unconscionable the system of fascism is. Crazy. It's because a letter has to be sent out. Don't check to see if a woman watched her son die. Just send her a letter to make sure she watched. Make sure she understood what
Lisa Brown, her son is Christopher Villalba. Maybe we'll close out tonight with that video of her talking about that. But I did want to share, Jeff mentioned getting the right to clergy. And some of you may have been on our vigil for John Ramirez when it was a couple hours after he was supposed to be executed in Texas, and he got a stay from the U.S. Supreme Court on the argument of whether he could have his pastor of choice in the death chamber with him in Texas, laying hands on him, praying out loud, and that won him a year of life. Well, he actually won that from the U.S. Supreme Court, and the state of Texas had to change its execution protocols. And I just wanted to note that I put a link to this in the chat. This is a link to the Democracy Now! Piece about this, but there's a new video out there. I've not seen this yet, but here's coverage about it in an interview with the person that made the video. And that's on Democracy Now! But that's John Ramirez, and he's the guy that won at least that expansion of rights. It's not always been that way.
Yeah, I would also say we sued the federal government last year for the right to have contact visits as ministers, and we filed a second suit, the right to be in contact with them as they die. And the feds folded, the ICLU guy said they'd never seen them folded so quick. They folded on the first one, gave us contact visits. First time in 18 years, I can actually touch some man I've been ministering to for 18 years every month. But on the condition that we withdraw the second one without prejudice, which means we can file it immediately. If an execution on a federal death row is announced, we'll file it immediately that we have the right to, that prisoner has the right to have their minister. It's not our right. It wasn't our right to get contact visits. It's the prisoner's right to have their minister touch them. And actually that first one was ours because that guy at ICLU said, "Look, I don't care. I'm not talking about his right. I'm saying, is it part of your religious responsibility to be in touch with people you minister, to be able to touch them?" I said, "Absolutely. I don't know of any religion that does not allow you to touch someone in your ministry, and that's so they gave us that, and we will if a execution is announced on the federal, we'll immediately refile the one that allows us to be in touch with them as they die.
I think it's important to point out, as Bill, you were kind of pointing out, each one of these challenges slowly chips away at the entire process.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, when you say, okay, well, we need touch, or we need a clergy in the chamber, or this drug is problematic, or this process is problematic. I used to think that some of these victories were, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. It's a little win. But I think we need to remember that these are all big wins. And I think that it's that adage of, poking holes in the dam until the dam collapses.
Yeah. Thank you all for what you do.
Was the oldest.
But this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm just looking. Michael Goodman asked, "Is there a right to consular presence for non-U.S. citizens?" And I don't know if there's a right to consular presence in the death chamber at the time of, well, certainly not in the death chamber, maybe in the witness chamber, or if, what I can say is there is something called the Vienna Convention on Consular Affairs, which guarantees you, if you are a foreign national in whatever country that's party to that convention, to have access to your consulate if you are arrested. And for whatever reason. But in particular, I can tell you that I know the government of Mexico and the government of Germany in particular, we know are aggressively supporting litigation for their citizens who are arrested and facing execution in the United States. That's as much as I really know about that, Michael, but I wanted to answer your question. And I would presume, I mean, it's been a while since we've executed a foreign national in this country. But I would presume that if and when they do again, that that government would be right in the middle of making sure that that person is having the best litigation possible. And actually, if they're doing the job the way they should be, then those people probably aren't getting execution dates at this point. So who knows where that's going to go? But that's what I can say about that. Other questions? Comments? Abu was asking about the protest against Carl and Walter Legrand. Yes, so Carl and Walter Legrand were executed in Arizona in the 1990s. One of them by gas chamber, and that's the not the nitrogen suffocation that we've been seeing lately, but actual cyanide gas chamber kind of execution, which is a whole different ball of wax. And if you really want to get traumatized, then you can go to our gas chamber petition and find there a link to the actual state protocol, as well as testimony by people who witnessed that last gas execution. And I should note also that Arizona has their attorney general is making noise about setting new execution dates. That's happening. And also, Charles and I were out in Arizona when they first resumed executions a couple of years ago. And this is just a side note here, but so the place where the protesters gather and is on a street corner adjacent to the prison property, and right across the street is a little motel, and next to that is a Chinese restaurant. And after we were all done and packed up, we decided we should get a bite to eat before we hit the road, and we went into that Chinese restaurant. And they said, "Oh, it's going to be 20 or 30 minutes before we can get your food out." And we said, "We'll go away." But a woman that was sitting there said, No, if you got time, it's worth it, wait. So we did. And when she finished eating, she came over to talk to us because she saw our t-shirts. And she said, did they have an execution today? And we said, yes. And she said, was it lethal injection or gas chamber? And we said it was lethal injection. And she expressed a sigh of relief and said, oh, thank God. And then she went on to tell us that she used to work in that prison as a corrections officer. And she'd been long retired, but she liked to come back and eat at that restaurant because it was so good in her view. But then she went on to tell us that she was in the guard tower over the execution chamber at the time of 7 executions. The first 6 were lethal injections, but the last one was the gas chamber execution of Walter LeGrand. And she said she had to wear a mask and a gas mask, and it was a whole different protocol. And she said that she could still hear the screams. For minutes, she had to sit and endure screams, hearing this man being executed by cyanide gas. And that caused her the next day to ask the warden for a transfer. And that was the end of her being a CO at the time of executions. And later, of course, she retired from that work. She refused to let it tell us her name. I asked her if I could take a video of her telling that story. But Charles, you might remember that. And it was just a powerful, powerful moment and one of those weird connections that happens to us in this work all the time. Yes. So go ahead, Charles.
I always say she may not have been part of the movement, but she made a movement. She stepped down from that position. She shared her story. You know, I seen the compassion and the passion in her face, but she still didn't want to be identified. But we need those type of folks too. You know, sometimes you just have to refuse not to do that kind of work.
Well, exactly. That's why, you know, we have members of former executioners who have joined our work. You know, you might have seen, if you look on the toolkit and the press, there's press about Ron McAndrew, who carried out the last 3 electric chair executions in Florida, and his traumatization and his advocacy for prison workers not having to be taking on the burden of executing somebody. And he actually, you know, he's a big time Donald Trump supporter, and he wrote a letter. We got it covered he wrote a letter to President Biden asking him to commute all the death sentences. And he said, you know, this is the one thing that we both agree on. Let's get rid of the death penalty. And we got coverage of that on Fox Nationals. Amazing. The level of coverage that occurred. So you can find a link to that in there. And I'll note that Allie has put a petition to the death penalty alternatives for Arizona petition about asking the Attorney General, Mays, whatever it is, in Arizona to not resume execution. So you can find that link is right there in the chat. And you know, no end to execution or to protest opportunities here tonight. Allie?
Yeah, I know we're starting to get to the end. And before we wind things down, I just wanted to mention, because I know you've been sharing it in the emails and I've been sharing it on our socials, the North Carolina Coalition for Alternatives to the Death Penalty has had an ongoing petition demanding that Governor Roy Cooper commutes all of North Carolina's death row. And we're getting close to them delivering that petition as well. So I just wanted to flag that and also put it in the chat.
No, thank you very much for that, Allie. So we're going to wind it down here, unless there's any other questions or things that people on the panel want to add before we do so. Give that a moment.
Just quickly, we've got just be looking out. We're going to do 2 online type events in the coming weeks for folks who are either scheduled to be executed in early 2025, or there's a possibility that they could be scheduled. So 2 events, and maybe this Friday and then the following Friday. So I'll have Abe put that out, or Abe will put that out. So
yeah, we'll get the word out about that. And Allie has put the link to the North Carolina petition in there. We don't have a Death Penalty Action doesn't have a sister petition to the North Carolina effort. We just point people straight to the North Carolina folks. Also want to mention before we go 2 things about what's coming up. Michelle from Missouri mentioned the awfulness and the juxtaposition of having to do work to raise money on so-called Giving Tuesday, which many of us find to be super annoying because every day is a day for giving, actually. But they have an execution on that date, and it's an opportunity for people to be helping. So what you're going to see from Death Penalty Action, I think this will be the third year in a row that we do this, we're encouraging people to make sure you're donating to the organization in the state where you live. Whether you like them or not, they still deserve your support, and we encourage you to do so if you are able to do so. I also want to note, with great gratitude, that Death Penalty Action will be, and most of you who get our emails and actually click on them should have seen this email from me this evening. We sent it to a limited group of people to start with, but we're announcing in a bigger way on Wednesday, after we get past Giving Tuesday, we're announcing a triple match on up to $50,000 in donations to support Death Penalty Action in in the coming months. So we're hoping to close that out by the end of December. But the missionary sisters, I want to make sure I'm getting this right, because I'm always terrible about names. We have here it is. So it's Our Lady of Victory, which is based actually in Indiana. Our Lady of Victory Missionary Sisters has given Death Penalty Action our biggest grant ever, $50,000, to support the work that we do to shine a spotlight on executions. And then a group of other donors to Death Penalty Action, including the David Dodge Foundation and Abigail Disney. Yes, Disney. She's the black sheep of the Disney family. And the Inside Outside Foundation and a woman named Karen Jones and the Lurie family have cobbled together, and another anonymous major donor have cobbled together a second $50,000. So we have a triple match for Death Penalty Action. All the money that's raised in the next, until we hit $50,000, will be tripled to support this work. So we encourage you to support your other favorite death penalty organizations, and certainly the organization in the state where you live. But thank you, Wilbur from Amnesty in Minnesota, says she's the white lamb of the Disney family. But Abigail has been great, a great supporter of ours, and allowed us to mention her name. But at the end of the day, we can't do this work without support, without financial support, and we want to be able to actually bring more staff on board. Right now, there's only 2 of us that are full-time and a bunch of other people that are consultants, and we're doing the best we can with what we've got, and we want to be able to do it better. And it's because people chip in that allows us to do what we're doing, to present programs like this, but also to make sure that our brand of activism, giving everyday people the tools to take leadership themselves locally and step out and be in opposition to the death penalty in whatever way makes sense to them, to make sure that's happening. That's our mission. That's what we do. And we want to do it even better next year. So we invite your support, and we're really grateful to everybody that donates, and also to these major donors and these foundations and these sisters there in Indiana who stepped forward. And Bob, thank you. Thank you for pointing this out. That's the other thing. There's a guy here who regularly attends these virtual vigils who said, hey, I know somebody there you can apply for some money. And we did, and we got it. And that's the other thing to think about, whether it's for us or any other organization. If you know a source that might put money into doing this work, let us know so that we can apply for it. And we will, because that's what keeps us moving. So enough of that. If there's nothing else, then we're going to close with the video of Lisa Brown, who Bill mentioned. Her son was executed. And you can find this on our webpage. It's the people versus the death penalty. There's a whole series of them. So any other questions, comments from our panel? Go ahead, Bill. Just saying peace out. All right, well, Bill, I hope not to see you in Indiana in a few weeks. Karen, I hope not to see you in Indiana in a few weeks. But again, the great news that the Oklahoma execution is off. Sadly, the Missouri execution is likely to happen no matter what. But maybe that'll be the last one of the year. As far as I know, there's no execution scheduled in January. But Texas has at least 4 on the books now. They just announced one for Moises, some or other. And of course, Steve Nelson is coming up in February, and I think there's one right before him. And we haven't seen a whole lot of others scheduled. We now know, Oklahoma doesn't have one scheduled, and they're going to have to set a new date, and that could happen this coming week. But that execution won't happen until sometime in 2025, and they're going to keep it moving. And of course, Alabama has dates coming, and we know that Thomas Creech is going to get a date soon. Maybe. He still has some litigation going, although he lost the thing that halted his execution most recently. So we're going to see where all that goes. And also, big questions about what's going to happen to Robert Robertson. Turns out the judge in his case is now apparently is going to recuse herself, which could delay that process even more. So much going on, so much to keep paying attention to. Karen and Bill and Glenda, thank you so much for joining us tonight from Indiana. And again, we hope not to see you later this month. But if it comes down to it, we'll see you on the vigil. And I know all 3 of you will be outside the prison up in Michigan City. And if that does happen, hopefully the weather will be not too bad. So Michigan City, for those who don't know, is right up in the northwest corner of Indiana. And that's why Sue was mentioning it, because she's going to come with a bunch of other people from Chicago. So there's that. All right. With that, I'm going to share this video as we take it off. So it's just 5 minutes. Stick around and watch this. And thanks again for being with us tonight. And watch, because there's going to be a lot of action coming up in the coming days, both about Missouri, and also we have to put all hands on deck and all the pressure we can on the White House. Joe Biden has now granted a pardon to his son. So if he's, I think I saw Randy Gardner posted in the chat that he's in a pardoning mood. So we need him. We don't want pardons for these people on the federal death row. We want clemency, commutations of their sentences. And that should be a no-brainer for Joe Biden. So keep us all in your prayers, and not just prayer, not just hope, but action that is tangible and can be felt by others is vital.
What was told to me by not just my son, but the others. The crime happened with 5 other teenagers. Christopher was the oldest. What was told to me by not just my son, but the others, it was never intended to be a homicide. They were going to joyride in the car, leave the car with them in the trunk, somewhere, make a call, and have someone come and get them. And I think things just got out of hand. I think Christopher snapped for whatever reason. And they were trying to cover up the evidence. When he explained it to me, it seemed to me that he had a psychotic break. Like he wanted to take it back as soon as it had happened, but obviously he couldn't. But he was guilty. He was the shooter. It's easier for them to make a monster out of my child in this case.
Is he a monster?
No, he's not. Like how long do we have before he's executed? This was in the very beginning. And they told me 5 years. Well, he was on death row 20. And I went from being a newlywed to the mother of a murderer in a matter of months. Being the assistant security manager, and I answered to a 2-star general, I had to go to that general and say my son was just arrested in a double homicide. It cost me my career. It eventually cost me my marriage. It cost me my relationship with my only other child for many years. I actually became a Messianic Jew when he went to prison. He converted 5 years after going to prison. He was completely transformed. He literally fought the prison chaplain for 2 years to hold services. But the area that they had, he called them cages, that each man was in a separate cage. They could see each other, they could speak to each other and share. He had 7 that he literally ministered to for 15 years out of the 20 years of his incarceration. He was 42 days past his 19th birthday when he was arrested. So they arrested a child and they murdered a man. I just wanted him to go peacefully. The death chamber's in the center. You have the victim family members to the inmates' right. The reporters are at their feet, and then the family members for the inmate are on the left. I can remember when the curtain was lifted on my room, the first thing I noticed was the back of Christopher's hand was completely bruised. I could see an IV coming out of the wall where whoever it was going to administer the drug is hiding. When they pushed the drug, the first thing I noticed on Christopher was that he puffed out his cheeks. He kind of went like that twice because the drug is breaking their bronchi in their lungs, and their lungs are filling up with fluid. It's like being waterboarded. It was like watching my son be strangled in front of my eyes, and I couldn't do anything about it. Literally. The first 2 years after he was sentenced, I dreamt of his execution every night. In the dream, he's reaching out to me. And his eyes were saying, "Save me, Mama." And when I actually was there witnessing it, he was crying when he died. But he was looking right at me. My sister, she just was holding my hand and she said, "He's gone, Lisa, he's gone." This is the letter that I received after Christopher's execution. It's down here, if you look closely, it says manner of death, homicide. This is Christopher right here. It's a double grave. I'll be buried with him when I go. And I usually come on his birthday and on Mother's Day. And, just when I'm missing him.